Questions, comments, thoughts?
Minutes.
Seconds? All in favor? We have any public comment?
Would you like to say anything? No public comment. And can I just remind everyone to put your microphones on if you have not actually turned it on?
Like it.
I do not have any announcements. Home business. So unfortunately, Jim is not here tonight as he was the representative on our strategic planning committee. But he and our other committee members did a great job. So the town has officially adopted its first strategic plan, which is super exciting. So I just wanted to share kind of the final updates with you. I know we had some updates kind of along the way, but to just kind of see where we've landed now that it's final and adopted by council. So I think in your packet, I think we've been over this before, but it has, the official vision, mission, and values adopted by the town. Um, so again, I don't have to read them all, but the town of Mills River preserves, sustains, and cultivates community is our vision. The mission of the town of Mills River is to foster community well-being. And then our values as a town are respect, service, and integrity. And so this is all the decisions we make going forward. We want to make sure align with these vision, mission, and values. And so below that, kind of our next step was to set goals that we would like to see accomplished in the next 5 years. So it's a 5-year strategic plan. And so with that, the council has adopted to attract, retain, and cultivate an engaged workforce, ensure financial health and resilience, encourage and cultivate thoughtful use of land, foster recreational opportunities for all ages and abilities, enhance community development, and uphold excellence in community safety. So as we go through our budget process and basically everything we do, we are going to look for alignment within these goals. Now, there's going to be a lot of other things we do that obviously are not part of these goals, but we want to make sure we're actively working towards these goals in a lot of what we do. So now, obviously, for you all, really, if you go through the objectives of each goal, you will find stuff that touches recreation in almost all of them, but obviously goal number 4, foster recreational opportunities for all ages and abilities. So that's something obviously this board in particular is going to work on. There are other things in especially encourage and cultivate thoughtful use of land. There's certainly things that touch on parks and recreation in there, community development, some other things like that. Um, so I did. So under each goal, I don't want to go through all of them with you and bore you all, but we can send you all the objectives if you want. But I did want to share with you the goals that council has adopted. And so these under goal 4, these are the objectives within those goals. So again, in the next 5 years, these are measurable goals that we are aiming to achieve. And this one is specifically for the foster recreational opportunities for all ages and abilities. So the first one is increase the percentage of recreation programs that meet the minimum participation requirement by 5% annually. So we want to make sure the programs we're offering are actually what people want and need. So we're going to make sure I think we do a pretty good job. Almost all our programs already meet our minimum requirements, but that's going to be a goal going forward and something we're going to measure going forward. We want to increase the percentage of resident participation by programs by 5% annually because we obviously have we allow non-residents while they do pay an extra fee to participate in our programs. We also want to make sure we're reaching our citizens and providing programs for our citizens. So each year over the next 5 years, our hope is that we'll grow 5% annually on resident participation in our programs. Identify potential tracts of land of at least 25 acres for future public park amenities within each council district by 2028. So So that's something we'll be looking into over the next year, is to identify potential areas for future parks. We know Mills River land is not as plentiful as it used to be, and so we want to make sure we're able to preserve some land for the future. So achieve 90% community satisfaction with Mills River Park by 2028. So we'll do that through community survey. So we'll actually launch a community survey this summer, and that community survey is going to be more than just park specific, but obviously the park will be touched, and that will be one area of measurement to kind of see where our baseline at. Are people happy with what we're providing here? And if we're not already at that 90%, then our goal will be to get to that 90%. And then achieve the NRPA performance metrics of number of residents per park by 2030. So this is a national standard that we want to make sure we meet. So that's something we're going to work towards. Activate a minimum of 20 acres on the park expansion property as identified through the park master plan by 2030. And then by 2028, identify all park facilities and amenities requiring universal design upgrades for facilities and achieve at least one upfit. So that would be specifically for accessibility, like we did our playground last year. So we're going to look at doing a big, evaluation
A new
of all our
pickleball court,
facilities,
yeah.
and then we can come up with a priority list to come up with a priority list to achieve at least one upfit, because we know that is going to be costly, but when we know, then we can start planning for that future. So those are the big ones. So it's exciting. So council has adopted this plan, so they've agreed that this is the vision they want us to work towards over the next 5 years. So it gives us a lot of good direction and a lot of exciting direction for things to work on. So with that, I'll take any questions. If anybody has any.
Yeah, this is super important. It's good. Navigate.
There's 4 districts am I correct?
There's 3 districts.
3 districts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so District 1 is the north end of town. District 2 is kind of I think Schoolhouse Road south.
Mm.
And then the line's kind of funky for 3 because it's like, but it's the very southern end of town. But it's goes farther north on the west side than it does on the east side. It's but I'm happy to share that map with you if you all. But it's basically like a north, central, and south are each council district.
So when it's I'm sorry. Identify tracts of land of at least 25 acres. So is that in 2 more districts? Like, does this count as 1 district?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what we're?
So we're in. Oh, I'm not even sure. I think we're District 2
2,
here.
I think.
We're in a
Yeah.
weird little cutout.
Okay.
So yes, ideally we would find, and that's really what's called for if you go back to our overall comprehensive plan. It called for another park in the north section of town and the more active section,
Right.
and then a more of the nature-based or agriculture-based park in the south section of town. So it kind of aligns with that, and just really looking at location and proximity to our residents going forward, which is why we aligned it with council districts.
I love that these are measurable. Makes it easier to know if the goals are being reached. Very good. Good job.
I had a question on the NRPA performance metric for the number of residents per park. Is that residents that come to the parks? Or?
No, so there's a standard, and I wish I looked it up before I came. I'll send it to you when I'm done. But the NRPA, which is the National Recreation and Park Association, has a number of metrics that basically says a community of this size should be offering this for its citizens. And so there is one of the metrics is how many parks based on your population. So we fall in the category of, I think they do ranges. So it's like, I think 6 or 7,000 to 10,000. So we're right in that range. And so they put a metric of how many parks you should have per number of residents you have
Okay.
in your town.
That's all.
So, and they have all sorts. They have it based on acreage. They have it based on all sort. I mean, it gets down to the like how many tennis courts you should have per, how many baseball fields you should have per resident, that sort of thing.
Nice.
And they do it based on population size because obviously we're not ever going to compare to the city of Asheville on how many parks we have, nor should we. So it really kind of narrows it down um, based on your population.
Say
Yeah.
There's never enough pickleball courts, I can tell you that. There's never enough. Anybody have any other questions on that? But I'm happy to send you that link to,
Yeah, they don't-
Michelle, maybe you remind me tomorrow and I'll send out a link to the metrics. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
have a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to phrase it for that. How much pressure, how much inquiries you getting for the baseball part?
A lot. We're booked almost
Well,
every
and the reason
night.
why I ask that is, I found out when I signed him up for baseball that the baseball league that used to be, is it Estes Middle School? On long shows?
Oh, that's
Long shows.
Cause on long shows,
Yeah.
you know, there was like 4 or 5 baseball
Mhm.
parks there. You know, at TC Robinson, that whole area.
Mhm.
Uh, that whole thing is gonna be a football field. So there's no baseball there. And
Mhm.
and that whole association is kind of being bled and merged. Whatever. I know the people in Fletcher were like, yeah, we went from 20 teams to now 35 teams. And we like all of
Mhm.
a sudden, because there's nowhere else to go. I was always curious how many people is coming out here all of a sudden.
We do get a lot. I mean, just as a reminder, so we're home for rugby middle school. So they practice out here every day, and then they play all their home games here. We get a lot of travel ball team that come practice out here, and I'd say almost every day rugby doesn't have a game. We have a practice out here, and we are also now Henderson County baseball. Henderson County youth baseball, their T-ball division plays out here on Saturdays, so that field is booked.
That grass is a lot of,
We're gonna have that discussion when we get to our field
Yeah.
rental rates. So we'll have that a little bit. Yeah, baseball thankfully is not as hard on the grass turf as our soccer and multipurpose fields. But we are getting a lot of use. We are booked almost every week, and there's people we turn away regularly for both the multipurpose fields and the baseball field. So, any other questions on that strategic plan stuff? New business. So every couple of years, we like to look at our fee schedule. I like to try to compare to other counties, and this has specifically come up because of the high use and the wear and tear we are getting, particularly on our soccer field, our baseball field some. But we close that down when it's much easier to close down when it's wet, so we're able to control the wear and tear on that a little better. But our multi-purpose fields are used 7 days a week. They are rented. We try to leave Saturday afternoons and Sunday mornings and Sunday evenings open for the public. But Monday through Friday, it is booked for practices. And then Saturday morning for games. And then again, Sunday mid-afternoon, we have another group that comes in and does a Healthy Kids Running series on our fields, which is a great program. But we're having to invest a lot of maintenance into our fields. And we have not raised the rental rates for our athletics facilities since they have been built. So when the park came online in 2012, these rates were the ones that were set, and they've not been raised in 14 years. So I always like to take a look. Our last study we did was in 2023, And it was the recommendation of this board. We did not change anything on that other than we added a non-resident rate for picnic shelters. But I do think we need to take a look at particularly our baseball field and my multi-purpose field rental rates. So of course I looked at all our neighbors to see where they were at, and guess what? Nobody else has changed their rental rates either. Henderson County Parks and Rec, I've talked to my colleagues over there. They're currently in the same process, so they're having discussions right now about increasing their rental rates. But of course, through the budgetary process, just like us, it would have to be adopted through them. So they don't have any decision or indication on what they're going to raise their rates to, but they're having similar pressures, just like we are. So I kind of this year, I put the 2023 study in there just so you can see that like all our local folks, really nobody has raised the rates. But so I kind of expanded the bubble just a little bit, like just to get outside of our little mountain, Henderson County, Buncombe County. So I looked at Morganton, Salisbury, Davidson County, and Watauga County to kind of see where they're at. And everyone outside of our little bubble are definitely at a higher rate than we are. So it's just something I wanted to talk through with you. So ultimately, a recommendation would have to go to council as part of the budgetary discussions to look at fee rate changes. But I can tell you, $10 an hour, that doesn't even, we're not here to make money, but it doesn't even cover the materials, forget staff time to prep fields, line fields, even $30 an hour for games. It's a lot of work, and we're spending a lot of time maintaining these fields and a lot of money. And so, I mean, just even Michelle and I were kind of joking, but even every time it rains and we have to cancel, the amount of time it takes to like that administrative time to like give them credit and contact the coach. And I mean, there's a lot involved in it, and our use is and demand is so high. I do think it values a good look at what we think is a fair rate. Again, we're not in it to make money. We're not trying to gouge people because there's shortage of field space in this county. But I do think we need to do a little better job on recovering some of our costs and efforts that are being put in here, because it is very hard on our facilities.
What might be an obvious question, but for Fletcher, it says $10 R.
Resident and $20 for non-resident.
See, told you no.
I don't think you need to really do resident versus non-resident and that's not-
Yeah, some places do. The issue with doing it is because a team as a whole cannot be a resident and non-resident, right? So you have a baseball team that is maybe a Mills River school-based team.
Yeah.
50% of those kids are Mills River residents, but 50% are not.
choose one
And
person and say, oh, well, this person.
yeah, so what tends to happen is then instead of like the coach who you want to be the one to have contact with, they pick like the parent to be like, oh, go rent the field because your address is in Mills River and get the cheaper rate. And then when we try to cancel a practice, they're at work not paying attention because they're not even thinking about the weather. They're just waiting for their coach to call to say practice is canceled. And it creates a lot of issues because the team as a whole is not going to be a Mills River team or the way our schools are based and the way sports leagues are based, a good chunk of any team that practices here are going to be Mills River residents, but it's not going to be all of them. And so it just makes it very difficult. Whereas like a picnic shelter rental, for a birthday party or like if you're coming from Hendersonville and want to use our shelter, we want to charge you a out of town rate because you didn't pay taxes. So we want to make up that difference. It's much more complicated, and the administration to implement it's not worth the additional time it would take to decipher who's residents, who's not when it comes to teams.
Right? Yeah. Are the fields mainly rented by schools and organizations versus?
It is I would say almost exclusively organizations, with the exception of the occasional baseball field rental.
Okay.
Sometimes the soccer field, but rarely. We do get people that like will rent the picnic shelter and they want to have like a baseball or kickball birthday party. And so we do get weekend rentals where
Okay.
people would like to do that. So there is some individual use. Again, we have an MOU with Henderson County Public Schools, so they don't pay for the facility at all. The other leagues, they pay this rate, and travel ball teams pay this rate, which is probably 90% of to 95% of our rentals are other organizations that are charging a fee for their kids to
Yeah.
to play.
And
So
how many hours at a time would one organization be here for their rental time? You normally?
it depends. So like baseball is typically an hour, sometimes an hour and a half.
Mhm.
For older kids, maybe 2 hours, but not more than that. For all the soccer practices, they typically rent it every night for 2 hours. So, but they send two different teams within that hour. So, per field. So like,
I ask because Waynesville is pricing theirs like per day or per evening, and so it's
mhm,
can opposed to per hour.
hour.
So I'm just so
Yeah. I the only difference would be we do have days where we have multiple groups rent it in a day. So that gives up that opportunity. So we do have like one organization that only rents one field on every Monday.
Mm.
And so that second part of the day, they potentially
yeah,
could be reserved for somebody else or somebody else's use.
yeah.
My fear with doing a full day, again, so if we told the folks that are doing the soccer leagues on Saturdays that you're paying for the day, that's they would book it from 8 a.m.
Mm.
till it's closed at dark.
Right.
Right now, we limit, like we've blocked out times that says you can't be here because we do charge them by the hour. A
Gotcha.
lot of those, again, they're working exclusively a lot with a lot of parks departments will only work with specific organizations. So they have MOUs or agreements that say you want to use it, like you have exclusive rights, kind of like Fletcher has with Fletcher Youth Baseball, right? They don't have other organizations coming in
Mhm.
unless, they have basically first right of refusal. Um,
I feel like Asheville's expensive. $200 for 4 hours.
Is there a lot of impact on the picnic shelters, or is that fairly easy to clean up afterwards, or?
we get a lot of use for the picnic shelters. The way we reserve picnic shelters is there's a 2 hour minimum, so you have to reserve it for at least 2 hours. We do leave an hour in between for our staff to be able to go in, clean up, empty trash, sweep up if a mess. But come peak, probably in about another month, we will easily see 3 to 4 rentals in a day, in both shelters. So it's a lot. They are very heavily used for sure.
And if I remember correctly, we used to do it for longer time slots,
Mm-hmm.
and we decided it was more beneficial to do it by the hour so we could give more people the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to rent it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. That's when we went to the hourly rate. They used
Yeah.
to do similar to some others have. I
Yeah.
think like they have $100 for the day in Hendersonville, or 150 that we had. It was, I think, the price was essentially the same. I think it was
Mhm.
$100 for 4 hours. So we just broke that down, saying
Mhm.
you have to have 2 hours, because a lot of people would, they're doing a little kid's birthday party. They are not going to be out here for 4 hours. And then so it would be reserved. Other people would miss an opportunity to be able to have something. So,
So we need to discuss if we're going to raise our rates on the picnic shelters, the multi-purpose fields, and the baseball field.
yeah, the other one I would also like to bring your attention to, and we do not use this one often, but so on this one, this is our current adopted pay schedule. This one kind of has a bunch of everybody. So again, the large Willow Oak shelter, $20 for residents per hour, 25 for non. The Hickory shelter, the smaller one, so that's 10 and 15. And then again, we talked about, so practice and games, so 10 and 30. I can tell you, we never have tournaments out here because tournaments, you need multiple fields and people aren't going to hold tournaments out here. So we've, in my 8 years here, we've never hosted a tournament. So everything's always been at the practice rate or game rate. We do have a special event permit, so for 4 hours, so someone who's taking over more of the park, think of a party in the park, or someone wants to do a 5K, there's a $250 fee for that. The other one, so for so additional staff down there, we have it, I don't know why it's broken out. It's $20. I can tell you that doesn't even cover the cost of salary of staff anymore. I'm sure it did in 2012 when it was adopted. But I do think we need to seriously look at that rate as well. If we were going to have to bring in extra staff for essentially a private event, they need to at least cover the cost of that staff member. So,
So the $20 is, what is that saying?
so that's
One
it.
$20 or
So
you're saying
$20,
an
it's
hour?
$20 per hour.
Okay.
So yeah, so if they're here for 4 hours, yeah, they would have to pay, $20 an hour.
Gotcha.
As I said, the current rate of even our part-time employees.
Plus
When you
it's
had,
per employee,
hmm
so,
if we had multiple employees, yeah.
and so how do you determine if you have multiple?
A lot of times it'll depend on the event. Just like how big it is and how, like, if it's something that's very self-sustaining, we trust them. We have our normal park ranger on duty. But if it's basically, if through the special event process, we determine that is bigger than we're comfortable only having one staff person here for, that's when we would implement that fee.
They would know that ahead of time.
It would be part of the application process. So yeah, they would, before they paid, we'd say, hey, you need to, we'll need to have staff there.
Well, I feel like that one's an easy one to decide on, that $20 per employee should be bumped up to whatever will cover that
Yeah.
employee. I don't know what that
Yeah, I
number
think,
is, but
yeah, probably $30 an hour is
Yeah.
closer.
does everybody feel about that?
Yeah, that makes sense.
From that. I think all our fees are pretty cheap, really.
So we agree on the additional staff at $30. And we work our way up. Special events is at $250. I don't see any comparison to other places.
Yeah,
I think
they're a little
that's-
harder to find because some places don't, some do like, it's not a standard practice. Other places have like a food truck permit and then you have to rent every pavilion and the soccer. So I couldn't find like some good comparisons
Do
for
you
that
feel like the
one.
250 is still kind of covering like what kind of events we're doing, or
Based on application.
Yeah, so the current, and we're going to talk about policies a little bit too. So again, this was the policy that was submitted or created when the park was created. So back in 2012, this policy has not been updated. So if that's something, if you want to dive into that deeper, as I said, we're going to talk about policies you all want to look at in just a little bit. But again, for some events,
yeah.
it's not that big of a deal. There's other times where they do take over the entire park,
Mhm.
and makes it hard. And
Put extra burden on staff. Yeah.
yeah, we would have to have something that is like a definitive, like this is 250, this is 500, like whatever
Yeah.
it is. So, and again, we don't necessarily need a decision now. We'll put this as part of the budget proposal. So when we get to the policy discussion, maybe that's
Yeah.
when we bring up
Yeah.
sooner rather than later to bring back to y'all and discuss what that should look like.
'Cause I
Yeah.
mean,
And we could set that.
Why, not what. So you'll have a
Mhm.
good idea of what scope.
Yeah, they have.
You only have 20.
It's not quite a 14-page application like the fire department, but Michelle's got a pretty good application over there. So we do have a good idea of what applies. And there are other things that do apply when they do, like, so if they do want a food truck, they do have to get a food truck permit through our planning and zoning department. There are some, again, based on the scale of the event, there's some other fees that do apply. But for the most part, it's, most people pay that 250 and that's it. So,
So then I say we come back to the special events rate and base that on what we decide about them filling out applications and what we maybe, what kind of breakdown we look at for that. So if I'm looking at the picnic shelter though, renting the large one for $20 now, or just saying if you're a resident, renting the large one for $20 and the small one for $10. I feel like that is
Cheap.
super cheap.
Oh, yes.
Super. I feel like we can definitely do.
yeah, it
Well,
is, but it, like, if you do look, like, if you look at other
Yeah.
places, like, we are not,
We're
we're,
not yeah.
we're not that far off. So,
It double, price of what we charge, but it's not like it seems a little bit more.
you're talking about picnic shelters or you're talking about baseball
Just
fields? More, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And I wonder if it's worth looking at this and thinking like, are these prices gonna be here for the next 10 years? Like,
Well,
It's a
I mean, we do have the
based on,
opportunity to
thinking
look
this
at it
much.
every year. And so, and I also would not recommend doing an enormous jump because you do get backlash from that. If we do feel like we want to get to a certain point, I would highly recommend we do a
Yeah,
incremental
I'd be
increase over
happier with a
X
smaller
number of
one if we
years.
Can agree that visit
Mhm.
sooner.
Because some of these towns are definitely bigger than Mills River.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
can't, we have to take that into consideration
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, and again, we're not here to make money. We're not, we're here to provide a service for the citizens,
we do
but we
need to
also
make
do need to try to,
Staff.
tax dollars, if we want to keep them low, cannot pay for everything. And so and this is just one area where it's a specialized use, where it's not, it's
Yeah.
for the public good to have the opportunity, but if you're having a birthday party, it's for you and your family. And so there should be an extra charge or fee. So
I feel like you could do a minimum $5 bump on the picnic shelters, and then maybe next year another $5. Because that one I feel like, I don't know.
Yeah, I would-
Most individuals paying for that, so you don't want to go too crazy. Versus the fields, I feel like you can
I would
add a little bit more.
I would think most usually it's probably 2-hour rentals or whatever. So you're thinking,
yeah, I would say
Would
it's
be-
2 to 3 hours is
3
the
so-
probably the average, 2 or 3
Yeah.
hours.
so that'd be 6. Oh, we went up 25. Yeah, I can.
And we
that.
do charge them, we like for setup and takedown, so we don't like we build a buffer in for us to clean. So it just as a reminder. So if they're gonna use it for 2 hours, they usually do 3, so they have 30 minutes to set up their party, 30 minutes of cleanup, and then our staff can get in
Yeah.
and
Say that nobody. Bless you. Thank you. Well, you said it, and this shows it that no one else has raised their prices,
nobody else in our
And-
area has
and you're-
raised their prices.
and probably need to desperately. Someone's got to do it.
Somebody's gotta do it
Someone's got to
first.
be the first person. But like I said, I don't want to we don't want to overcharge on anything, obviously. So
Yeah, it's finding that balance of covering our costs, but again, ultimately, whether we like it or not, Fletcher is our
Yeah.
competitor too, and
Yeah.
so if they can pay, go to Jackson Park or Fletcher Park and pay less,
Yeah.
they might be willing to do it. We offer a much nicer facility, in my opinion, but so we want to stay competitive, but we gotta. It's about finding that balance.
We're talking about
I need-
$5 more.
I need a calculator. Okay, so sorry.
Yeah.
So they're doing $75 for 4 hours. So that's $18.75 an hour, assuming obviously for 4 hours. So I don't think 15,
15 bucks, I think.
I mean, that's for the small one. They're doing that for the large one though. So we're actually charging more.
Yeah, yeah, we
We're
do,
actually
yeah, we're
charging
charging
more.
more. Mm-hmm.
'Cause that's
They
a-
charge more for their non-residents.
Double it for non.
They do, they double it for everything.
Well, that's something. I know who that would make happy in my household. We charge the non-residents.
And that's a very, very legitimate, we've
Uh,
done, I think, 20%. I mean, that's something we can look at is if we don't want to raise it for residents to look at a small increase. I would shy away from doubling because well, it's a lot and you have to remember they are offsetting our costs. So if we don't have any non-residents, they're basically helping subsidize the cost for our or for our residents. So the non-residents, by paying more, are helping make it us to be able to offer it cheaper. And so if you
Mhm.
price non-residents out and to not use the facility, there's some, you're going to have less rentals overall potentially. And then you're going to have decreased revenue. And then next year we might be looking at having to raise it for residents if you do. So I do think it's a balance. I do absolutely think they should pay more than non-residents. I think it can be a bigger difference than what they are currently paying, but I would seriously think about recommending that it's double because then you end up pricing folks
I
out.
think that's a
Or
little
like
offensive.
per every day, $5.
I don't know. I'm inclined maybe to leave the resident at $20 and make the non-resident like 35. And kind of, it's not double. Does that seem too much?
So
If you don't like that, then no.
currently our policy has been to be 20% higher,
That- Need my calculator.
to the nearest dollar.
20%, the non-resident 20% higher, is that
It
what
was
you're saying?
20
And that's what we do for
Uh,
programs,
Okay.
but it's actually, I mean, the small shelter, it's already 50% higher.
Mhm.
Um,
So.
yeah. And
I'm like,
the other thing I'll mention is, in the past, we lived in a cash world where
Yeah.
things had to be around 5 or 0.
mhm.
Don't feel like you have to necessarily stick to that anymore because almost
It's
exclusively done with credit cards is our payments. So just because it's a round number and like if you feel better with $18 instead of 15,
So it's
I-
totally
I don't-
irrelevant, but selling houses every once in a while, when you see one listed for $477,000 and $712, you're like, why did they do that? Just
Yeah.
for fun,
Yeah.
just because
Just
they
because.
could. And you're like, get it. You don't have to.
But yeah,
That's
when
fine
these
for me.
rates were originally set, people were almost exclusively coming into our
Yeah.
office and paying cash.
Yeah.
95% of our rentals are now done online credit card and they're getting that 3% credit card fee anyway. So they're getting this in some odd sense
That's true.
anyway.
Because of the fee, yeah.
So just keep that in mind since you keep talking about the $5. It doesn't necessarily have to be that round number where someone can just give us a 20 for change.
So I kind of like having the residents keep their fee. Maybe, as Tammy mentioned, going up on the non-residents, a small percentage, and keep the residents. What they're at.
Go up $2.50, $5.
I wouldn't recommend change just because pennies are a shortage for the few people that do come in and pay cash. I would recommend keeping it to the whole dollar. at
$3.
least.
So no change. So
30 for the large for a non-resident. And
keep the resident at
20 for the small, non-resident.
So they're gonna
Yeah,
be
it's a big
30.
jump for the small.
Gonna keep it at 30 and 10. It's gonna be 30 and 10.
I'm just saying, yeah, $30 for non-resident for the large, $20 for non-resident for the small. It's just the numbers thrown out there to get people.
Regardless, Jeff.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
How much for the non-resident for the small? I missed that.
20,
20,
which
okay.
makes it
That's gonna be
double.
double,
So
but
that's,
for non-resident.
still much fee.
And for the not, there's a reason why non-resident come to this park versus other park. This is. Heck of a lot cheaper than Chuck E. Cheese.
I do think we should try to make the resident versus non-resident something that's a standard or proportional, where like I know it's already not for the like it was $5 higher for each, which is why it was picked.
yeah,
But having one, even if you go to 30, is only like a 33% increase from resident to non-resident, where it'd be a 50% increase for the small.
right.
So I would
Agree.
recommend making it either, again, is it just $10 more? You can go up 35 and 25 for non-residents. You can, I don't know. I just think, or yeah, like so if it was, 20 and 30, and then 10 and 20, then it's at least a proportional like $10 more for both shelters, whereas having one that's double and one that's only
Yeah.
30% more,
So,
they would actually, if you did that, they'd end up paying more for the smaller shelter than they would the big shelter. So we don't, just
Don't
something to
want
keep in mind for a recommendation. I mean, you guys threw out there the $5 increase, if we only did the $5 increase for non-residents.
so what if another option, sorry, I don't do math in my head, even with literal numbers. Okay, what, so what if we did go up on the residents, just went up on the residents just $2, like she said, it didn't have to be $5. And so for the large resident shelter went to $22. And then, and what was it? You said we were at 20% higher?
That's what we do for our recreation programs. This has not followed that specifically.
So if we don't.
But we
follow-
can do it based on a percentage. So if you wanted to set a base rate for residents and then have a standard, it's 20, 25, 30% more.
Yeah, I would say if it was 30% more, and then we had to round to an even number or to $1, it would, we could go to 20. It would be $7, so 22 plus 7 is 29. That's an awfully odd number. Yeah. But anyway, y'all get what I'm
So
saying.
let me
Like,
throw this out there, because again, we're focusing on the picnic shelters. I really want to get into the field rentals. That's what I'm more concerned about. But I mean, this is important too, just for consistency's sake. Right now, the Hickory shelter, so the small shelter, is 50% higher. What if we matched the resident rate to 50% higher, would get that to $30. So the only picnic shelter rental that would change for non-residents would go from 25 to 30. And then
My first recommendation,
might have,
act like it's your idea. Go ahead.
that
So,
brings them to parity.
so just lease the non-resident to 30 and leave everything else as.
Well, that was just thrown out there that makes it consistent across both shelters that it's 50% higher than the resident rate.
All right, let's go. Y'all want to write that down just for now and we'll move on and
Absolutely.
let that sit on your tummy for a little bit? Okay. Because clearly somebody wants to talk about fields.
Yes.
Do you want to- So yeah, so again, field rental. So currently, again, we're charging $10 an hour for practices, $30 an hour for games. Now, again, that is in line with currently what our neighbors are offering, but they also have not raised their rates. So I would like to look at some sort of incremental increase for that.
No.
It is a good deal.
We could do another percentage, like a 10% increase across all the fields.
Then you'd be going to what, like $12, $33.
That's
15,
only be-
35,
15, 35.
15 and 35. Good with that.
We don't have problems.
We have no, as I said, I've been here 8 years and we've never used the tournament rate.
There's no real reason.
The same right now.
Yeah, I don't think that one.
$200. We'll just put that.
$50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I think $15 is good. Unless somebody was hoping for like a $300 percent
No, I think
increase or
15
something.
is very reasonable. As I
Okay.
said, we don't want to price
And
ourselves
if that's
out,
the case,
but-
they need to give me 2 weeks right now.
No, I think it's very reasonable. As I said, I still want to make it fair for our coaches. You know, we still do get those birthday party rentals. I think this just does a little better job of helping us at least cover staff time. You know. So the tournament rate, did you all say you wanted to keep the same or you want to up that?
Yeah.
There you go. All right. So I just want to make sure I've got this written correctly. So Willow Oak, the large shelter, staying at $20 for residents, $30 for non-residents. The Hickory smaller shelter, $10 for residents and 15. So those are staying the same. Soccer field. So for practices, $15 for games, or $15 for practice, $35 for games, and then the additional staff moved to $30 an hour. Okay. And if you all want to put that in a motion to make that recommendation to council as part of the budgeting process, I would take that motion and I will include it in my budget recommendations.
I make a recommendation that I make a motion that we make a recommendation to council to make the changes that we have just discussed on the Parks and Recreation fee schedule.
I will second that.
Right, all in favor?
That.
Aye.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. So as I said, that'll get included as part of the budget. Ultimately, it's town council's decision whether or not to keep that fee. They could raise it more, they could make it less, but here it's a good start on making some recommendations. And so if they do adopt it, these would not take effect till July 1st for this year. So okay. Next on the agenda is I just want to do an overall discussion of future agenda items. One area in particular I wanted to discuss is some of our Parks and Recreation policies. So we as a town have actually created our own internal policy committee that we are reviewing. As you saw with our fees, a lot of things have not been updated in a really long time. And so it's a 4-person committee. I sit on it as well as 3 other town employees. And we are going through and reviewing all our old policies and seeing where there's gaps, where policies either just didn't exist, didn't created, or do we have extras that need to be, you know, changed, modified just because they're no longer relevant. So with that, I just wanted um, to go over is look at our Parks and Rec specific policies, because obviously you all, some of these, some people on this committee were here when helped create these policies. And believe it or not, as we started digging in, there was policies I did not even know we had and had never used since I have been here. They were filed away somewhere, and we have either created practices or policies that do not necessarily jive. Nothing super serious, but so I kind of just created this list, and I wanted to get your input on what you all think is the most important, so we can start putting that on future agenda items to bring back to this committee. So the first few on the list, we already touched on it a little bit, that hasn't been looked at in 12 years, is our special event permitting policy. So that was adopted in 2012 and has not been updated since. There are 3 on here. So these next 3 on this list were also adopted in 2012 when the park was adopted. And again, I did not know these. No one ever showed them to me when I got here. It's hard to claim ignorance 8 years later, but here we are. As we started, the policy committee started digging through old books and minutes and things. None of them are super serious. One was a lost and found policy. I did not know we had, of how we manage our lost and found. So that was enlightening. An inflatable use away from shelter policy was also adopted in 2012, and
I feel like we have.
we have had
Talked about
we
that.
have so we have had that discussion where we have made decisions that we didn't feel necessarily were policy, and that's where a lot of this is going to come into discussion of what's policy, and some things that we have to go to council, like a lost and found policy isn't even necessarily something that should be a council adopted policy. It should just be a practice or standard that we have internally as staff that everybody's comfortable with. So that's part of what this policy committee is going to go through. And so we are going to ask, so there was also additionally, there is a picnic shelter policy, rental policy on the books that goes against all these. I mean, it says we take deposits, we take copies of people's driver's license, like all these things that we in practice have not done since I have been here, and are not good practice. So we are working on a list of policies, not just parks and recreation ones. There's a lot of others that were created really early on in the town when there was like only a couple of employees. So everything kind of went to council that probably didn't need to. And so we're going to ask council to sunset a lot of those policies and just say, hey, these no longer apply to anything we do. We've had that inflatable use policy. Our insurance company says, do not allow that. Our risk management folks say, do not allow that. So we have internally changed that policy, but there is a policy on the books that says, hey, you can pay a $50 fee, which isn't on our fee list either, but which is why I didn't know it was there, and you can put a inflatable anywhere in the park. So again, in practice, we're not going to allow that. We just want to make sure our policies now get up to date with all those things. And again, so there's a picnic shelter rental policy that we have updated over the years, even before I got here. And it no longer aligns with the official adopted policy in council. So that's kind of so the 3 with stars next to it, those were the ones that I didn't know existed, and that we have other procedures and things that we do have in place and standards that don't jive with the current policy. So I just want to let you know, those are 3 for sure we're going to ask to sunset and not just modify. But with this, we just wanted to take a look at kind of all our policies. As we're asking council to sunset some, there's probably other ones that we need to look at. So as I said, I've listed kind of all the standardized practices and policies that we currently use regularly. And so there is still the special event policy. Again, that hasn't been updated since 2012. But we have in the last 5 years updated our facility naming policy, our fee waiver policy, our park schedule fee, which is what we just discussed. So that is adopted annually by council. So that's as part of the budget. It's weird that, again, we have separate policies in there that say what our fees are, but then it doesn't jive with what's in our adopted budget, which is also an official action of council. So that's where we're asking for the sunsetting and to just make sure our policies are based on what it's ever adopted in the fee schedule. We have our cost recovery policy, which we did in 2024. Our park plaque standardization was adopted in 2020. So those are at least, somewhat recent within the last 5 years. And then we have some other practices. So again, these are never, these aren't adopted by council, but they're standards that we as staff have. And so that's our memorial tree and bench program, our field use agreements, our picnic shelter agreement, and then our parks and recreation policies and procedures. So that's how that covers a lot of like, how do we cancel a program? Like what minimum, like what is our refund policy as far as programs go? So all those little like intricate things of like again, if our program doesn't make a minimum, how do we issue like what defines a, I'm trying to think what else it covers. It, what inclement weather, how we make that decision, just some of those practices that we follow as a standardization to do that. So that's what's in that policy. So as I said, looking at this list, is there um, is there any of these we want to tackle first that we think are a priority to bring back for future meetings? And is there anything we think is missing that we know we need to create? I know there's one that we have talked about, but I promised to give Michelle till after Mills River Day to talk about scholarship policy and procedures. I promised I'd let her get some breathing room till after Mills River Day. So that'll probably be on like the May agenda to do that. But is there any other? So one, is there a prioritization here that you would like to see over the next 6 months to a year for us to bring back to this board to review? And two, is there anything else you think we're missing that you would like to see come back to this board?
What is the park plaque standardization box?
That it's exactly what it sounds like. It puts a standardization of the size. So if somebody donates something, there's a standardization of what size, what it needs to look like. So people just can't say, here's a whole lot of money. Here's a giant
Statue.
20-foot statue with a plaque that has bad words on it, because that's what that, it's a fairly simple policy that just gives standardization so everything looks alike and we don't have mismatched plaques throughout the park.
Probably the special events.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Region that's
Yeah.
shelter.
Prioritize those.
The only thing I can think that's left out is, I think it's all, but, so. Pocket for double scope of those. Park, spot.
Mhm.
Special items. They were calling it, but
Yeah. Yes. Now, so the special event permit policy is specifically for outside organizations that use our park. So like Splash Bash, that's us. So that would not fall under. So if there's special event stuff you'd like to talk about as far as our internal special events, we can certainly put something on there. But this event is specifically to allow outside organizations to come in and use our facility. Yeah. But yes, party in the park. There's a lot of 5Ks. They're always sporadic. So, but I think it's definitely worth a look. And then you guys want to look at the picnic shelter policy as well. Did I hear that?
yeah, probably.
Alrighty. So with that, we have that. As I said, I've already noted the scholarship to bring that back to a future meeting. Are there any other items you all would really like us to look at, address over the next year to bring back for future discussion items? Any burning questions, burning discussions?
Just as you see things come up.
Yeah, definitely always like if there's things you're like, hey, I got this question, I'd really like to discuss it in this forum. Just please either let Tristan know or let me know and we'll get it on an agenda. So as I said, we'll have I think this is a good year to do things because we're kind of in that limbo of like all the projects are already rolling. So there's not a lot of like, how do we get this rolling? There will be some stuff, and I'll of course give you all updates, but I think this is a good year to tackle some of these. I don't want to say small potatoes, but things that are important that sometimes get overlooked.
Since you're sitting on that board of looking at the policies, you'll see them coming through and
Mm-hmm.
wanted to bring them to us.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, that's,
Forgot.
yeah, I want to make sure you all get to see it, and then I'll take them to the committee is the way it would work. So if we update, like if we want to look at updating the special event policy, it would start with this board, that go to the policy committee, make sure it doesn't mix with anything else, and then go from there. And then we're again hoping to get more clarification on what policies stay at a committee level versus need to go back to council for approval. Obviously legally by law, anything finance money based, so setting up fees, things like that, all need to go through council. But a lot of procedural stuff doesn't necessarily apply to. So
Okay. Spirit of John cases.
Our next,
Next meeting, April.
April 28th.
sounds good.
Yep, that is the same week as Mills River Day, so y'all better.
Okay. Great.
It's gonna be a
We'll
long
on-
week
we'll
for
be on
us.
Top of our game then.
So be kind to us that
Okay.
we're gonna be.
And, we call this an adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.